HOA sells a non-HOA house, posted by Catfish21SM. I'll spare you the boring details, but we lived in a small rural farming community that's been growing quite rapidly lately. A lot of the farmers are growing old and selling their farmland. There are two ways to do this. They can either split it into lots and sell a piece at a time, and this typically brings in more money but is a much slower process. Then they can sell the whole thing at once. Again, faster process, less money. This particular farmer decided to sell his land in lots because it was in a developing neighborhood and he could make a much larger profit doing it that way. My friend bought a few lots and built a very nice house on it. Then a large company came in and bought most all of the remaining lots and built a subdivision on the land. In order to keep everything in a consistent look, they themed the properties after my friend's place. His was a lot nicer, obviously. I mean, he didn't cheap out on it like they did, but they had similar styles to his. He didn't mind because that just raised his property value even more. Now, it's important to note that my friend who this is about basically lived right in the center of the subdivision. He bought a place in the middle of the property because of its view. Probably not the best idea in retrospect. So the people who built the subdivision, they also founded an HOA. My friend was invited to join on multiple occasions, but always refused for obvious reasons. Because of some legal clauses about pre-existing properties, he wasn't required to join, even though he was in, well, the center of the subdivision. He did maintain a pretty good relationship with the HOA president and some of the members of the community as well. He was regularly invited to HOA events and sometimes actually took them up on the offer. He enjoyed it. But then, a new president took over the HOA. I guess this new president didn't really do any research because he just assumed that my friend was part of the HOA. He contacted my friend about several violations that he noticed, along with late fees due to the HOA. When my friend tried to explain that he was not part of the HOA, the new president just shooed him off and ignored him. My friend obviously just ignored all of the fees and all the fines and so on. Now, my friend was a winter bird. For anybody who doesn't know what that means, it's a fancy way of saying that someone that lives in the south during the winter and in the north during the summer. They typically own two houses, or sometimes they're just retired and they jump around between family members that are happy to take care of them for that time. My friend in particular was a doctor who worked for a hospital here in the summer months and a hospital in the south in the winter months, so it all worked out. So saying this, you could probably imagine the horror on his face when he came home and found all of his locks changed and another family living in his house. The HOA president knew that he traveled south every year, so he waited until he was gone, then sent an eviction notice for all of his being late, and he had a friend that owned a realty firm and they sold the house and moved in a new family, all while my friend was gone. My friend contacted a lawyer friend of his from back in the south and they started the process of suing the HOA. Big city lawyer versus small town HOA who was absolutely in the wrong. Guess who won? Oh yeah, and did I mention that the family that moved into my friend's house, they joined in as well. They also sued the HOA because they had to be relocated on short notice and they had taken out a very hefty loan for that property. Now, I don't know exactly what happened, but I do know that the HOA president lost his house and he skipped town. I'm guessing he probably took the brunt of the attack. This has got to be the worst one that I've read in a long time because you were suing the HOA president. I mean, look, you do not do that. How does he think he is going to be smart enough? Oh, this person's not going to realize that a whole freaking new family is in his house when he comes back from the winter? This dude's an idiot. Flip straight up, he does not deserve to be the president. Get out of town, man. Way to go, OP. OP's HOA has a problem with the support group meetings being held at their house, with updates posted by I'm Fed Up With My HOA. Nice name. For the last 18 years, I have been a member and an organizer of a support group for trauma survivors. The room that we were using for our meetings in a nearby church was recently flooded and badly damaged, and I haven't been able to find another suitable room for our meetings due to the pandemic. Not wanting the group members to be deprived of an important resource, I decided to host some meetings in my basement or in a secluded area of my garden with a reduced number of attendees. Now, we respect social distancing rules, we wear masks, we sanitize our hands, and everything. So this came to the knowledge of the HOA board. A few weeks ago, some HOA board members knocked on my door and told me that they weren't pleased with this at all. They told me that people in the neighborhood feel unsafe knowing that drug addicts gather at my house. I told them that our support group is not for people fighting addiction, or maybe some of them are, but they don't tell me, but for trauma survivors, and that this would stop as soon as we could go back to the church. They weren't convinced and called me inconsiderate and asked me to stop. I didn't because I consider that I have a right to invite people at my house and talk to them. Yesterday, I received a strongly worded letter from the HOA demanding that I stop inviting drug addicts to gather at my house because it puts everyone in danger, and they're not the kind of people we want in that neighborhood. They said that I had a chance to make things right, but didn't, so they're fining me $500. They will fine me for every meeting I organize from now on and threaten me with a lien on my house if I don't pay the fines. The reason they invoke is that our meetings are breaching the peace of the neighborhood and making people feel unsafe. This is completely untrue. Our meetings are 6 to 7 people max. We don't make noise. We don't drink. People park on my driveway or on legal spots in the street. We cause absolutely no disturbance. I checked the HOA rules and I cannot seem to find which one I would be breaking. Does the HOA have any right to stop me from organizing meetings at my house? I don't see how our support group is any different from having a few guests at my house. The HOA is run by people who don't seem to know what they're doing, and I think they'd stop harassing me if I had real legal arguments to oppose. Thank you for your advice. Update. I wrote back to the HOA to dispute the fines, and I sent a polite but firm letter asking them to show me precisely which rule that I'm supposed to be breaking, as I was advised by commenters in here. I also pretended that I feel insulted that they're calling me and the group members drug addicts. Look, I felt bad doing so because I know that addiction is a disease and not a sin or whatever, and that I would raise heck because of this and call a lawyer. As a result, the president of the HOA called me and basically confirmed that they haven't found a specific rule that I would be breaking, but it was more of a general feeling that people had, that I was making them uncomfortable, and that should not go on. I asked why they were uncomfortable, so he talked about the fact that they think that I'm letting drug addicts gather at my home and that would bring crime to the neighborhood. I explained, again, that the support group is not about addiction and the members are not drug addicts, and the president said, well, he knew, but some homeowners have trouble accepting it. Now he confirmed, as I suspected, that there are other things they have trouble accepting about me, and it's not about drugs. Then I tried my luck a little by pretending that what they are doing amounts to discrimination against people who need mental health support, and they were infringing on my right to peacefully enjoy my property, and was adamant that I wouldn't pay a cent in fines. He said that I seemed passionate about the argument and he doesn't want to be involved in a legal dispute over this, so we came to an agreement that I would move as many meetings as possible online and only have people at my place when there was no other way, which makes sense within COVID times anyway. In return, the HOA will drop their claim and leave me alone. I haven't heard about them again, so I guess I'm fine. Thanks for everyone's good advice. I'm glad OP stood his ground because this HOA kind of sucks. Mental health is important, and then they're thinking they're just all drug addicts. I mean, wow, this is a huge reach. Thanks, Mr. HOA President. They need to be shutting up on this one. Seriously, man. What a way to stereotype and discriminate. Jeez. This HOA story is called Help Navigating a Special Assessment, posted by JNash85. I live in a condo, and our HOA is made up of 100 units. I've lived here since 2018. At the time, there was a big deal made about roof repairs. We paid $75 a month in fees, and the HOA is supposed to be responsible for the roof. The only other thing the HOA pays for is lawn maintenance and trash pickup. Back in 2018, they said we had to replace all the roofs and quoted the job around $400,000. This special assessment was voted down and nothing was said again. Last Saturday was the annual meeting, which I was unable to attend. I came home to find some documents taped to my door stating, "Do not pay your July dues." Basically, one person in the neighborhood is calling for a special meeting to remove 2 of the board members who have been on the board since 2018 and then fire the management company. I came home today and I found another document on my door, this time from the management company, stating that this person is spreading false information, possibly committing fraud, and she is being served with a cease and desist order. The management company also stated that there will be a follow-up meeting in the next 60 days to discuss that special assessment. If it were up to me, these 2 board members would be removed, we would get a new management company, and we would rewrite the bylaws to lower our fees and make each homeowner responsible for their own roof. There are now 2 other development phases, and that is how the HOA is ran. The roof repair does not seem logical to me. The management company has terrible Yelp reviews, some of which state that they tried to run the roof repair scam on their subdivisions. The fact of the matter is, I can afford the proposed assessment if it goes through. At the same time, I don't want a target on my back from the current board members if the vote to remove them goes south. Any advice on how to proceed? Update. Thanks for the replies. To clarify, these are single-floor condos, basically 4 condos in each unit. I do see the problems with everyone being individually responsible for the roofs, and I feel like the fees are pretty low. Honestly, it seems like a lose-lose situation. Even if the roofs do need to be replaced, there's been a lack of transparency around the entire process. On the other hand, even with all of the due diligence done, I still see it getting voted down by the majority of the owners. Most are elderly and probably can't afford it. Advice in the comments says it's not really possible to make each unit in a condo building responsible for their own roof or other common elements. That said, if the management company is pulling a scam and the board is in on it, you should be talking to a lawyer and having experts review the documents. You have a process to remove board members. Follow it. Pay your dues. Always. Yeah, man, if you're being taken advantage of, you totally have the right to vote in and get these people out of here. Yeah, I mean, each person responsible for their own roof, that's cool with me. I know there's probably downsides to it too, but the point is, if people are taking advantage of you and the other members of the HOA, you lawyer up and you take them down, and that should do the job, I hope, right? I at least hope it would. Am I the butthole for calling the HOA on the neighbors for installing a 25-foot tall bouncy castle and water slide in their backyard? I never thought I would be in this position, but I'm the one who sought out the 75-year-old members of the HOA board for assistance. Having said that, I feel like I was very patient and accommodating, but I just got pushed too far. But still, anytime you call the HOA, you may be the butthole. So my neighbors started out in February and March with a bouncy castle in their yard. I could not see it, but I could certainly hear it when the kids would start bouncing by 4:30 and 5 a.m. It honestly seemed that the kids would wake up really early and the parents would just send them outside so that they could sleep more. But it was incredibly loud. I had a polite conversation with the parents and they assured me that that bouncy castle was temporary. I put up with it for probably like 3 weeks, nearly every single day, until I explained that I work nights and I was being woken up right as I was getting to sleep. So to their credit, they stopped jumping early in the morning and everything was fine, until about 3 weeks ago, when a huge bouncy castle suddenly appeared in their backyard. It was at least 25 feet tall. It completely blocked my view of the mountains so that I could see the kids were able to look right into my bedroom window from the top too. Unfortunately, this coincided with a shift change for me, and now the kids were up until 11 or 12, even 1 a.m. on some nights, and now I had to wake up at 4:30. I didn't even realize it was also a water slide until I realized that probably hundreds of gallons of water had run under our shared fence and actually pushed all my dog's poop up against the back door. I went over and I talked to them, and the dad essentially said, "Oh, we were polite enough to change our schedule for you the first time, and this is our backyard. Screw you." I decided something had to be done because potentially my house could be damaged, let alone the sleep issue. So I called the HOA, and however the machine works, my neighbor had been called in front of the board meeting, fined about $1,000 for covenant violations, as well as being ordered to pay for damages to our joint fence. I thought everything was good, except for some dirty looks from the neighbor, but literally every one of my family and friends are saying I'm the butt for going to the HOA. While opinions do vary, the general gist is now I'm the crabby neighbor ruining kids' fun. Then I should have got some noise-canceling headphones and ignored it, and they would have popped the slide at some point anyways, and it would have taken care of itself. The idea, I guess, is that I tattled and got my way by unleashing a bunch of busybodies with too much free time and too much undeserved power. Commenter Fortune-Telling Boobs says, "Not the butt. I don't typically side with snitches, but this is pretty clear. The early hour noise and the damage to the property are big no-nos. Yeah, dude, you are completely fine. I'd never take up for HOAs in the stories that we read, but honestly, you just use them as a vessel to get your neighbors back. If you gotta sleep, man. I'm a dad. I got kids. Yeah, I get how it is. But your sleep, they are violating those noisy hours. I'd report them. I would. I don't care because they're damaging your property too. No sleep, damaged property. It's gonna make me pretty grumpy. I don't know. Would it make you grumpy? It would me. Management company bought. Auto pay canceled. Late payments due. Posted by JJR92 with updates in the comments. Apparently, in February of this year, the management company that runs my HOA was bought. I just got a bill from collections telling me that I owe the back payment, plus $90 in late fees and collection fees. I had been set up on auto pay for years and I'd never missed a payment. As soon as I got that, I contacted the new management company and offered to immediately pay all the back payments, but requested for the late fees to be waived. The phone call went very poorly, and I was informed that there was no way for the late fees to be waived, and the only options were pay the assessments, collection fees, and late fee, or hire an attorney. Yes, she jumped straight to an attorney when I asked if there was any other option. She said that all the statements were posted to the online profile and were mailed out. I didn't know the online profile had changed from our old one, and I don't think I missed any mail. I'm pretty good at opening important mail. Also, they had my email on file, and I can confirm that I was never notified by email. When I asked for any sort of confirmation that they were sent via snail mail, she said, "It's not my responsibility to prove that to you. It's your responsibility to make sure your dues are paid." I have a Facebook account, but I only check it once every year or so. But I knew that our community has a pretty active Facebook group. After that call, I went on the group and I did a search for the new management company name. Horror stories all the way down. I paid the fees mainly because I don't have the time or money to fight over a $90 fee. So I'm mostly here to rant, but any suggestions would be appreciated. First update. OP says, "Thanks a ton for the advice. I already paid the fees because I was pushing up to that date that they were going to put a lien on the house. I know, probably more scare tactics, but they worked. I also found out that the board already voted to drop them and we're hiring a new management company. So while paying the late fee sucked, it's motivated me to get more involved. I'm going to start attending all the meetings I can, and there's an open seat that I might consider trying to get on. I can take an informal poll in our Facebook group. The rep on the phone said, when I asked for evidence, that they sent previous notices, so 90% of homes got them, but you just randomly didn't? To which I replied, well, why did 10% of the homes not get them? I think she was maybe just trying to make a point, but maybe it's an actual number that she didn't just pull out of thin air. Next update from OP says, well, the board is replacing the company. This new management company bought the old one. I think the board is handling it well with replacing them. It just seems like it's taking some time. I was on a call a few weeks ago when they were presenting new management companies. They seem to be doing a decent job. Yeah, my neighbor just stepped down from being in the board. Super nice guy, but with another change in management companies and trying to fill 2 board seats, I want to give them some time. As I said in another comment, this has made me want to get more involved and possibly try to get on the board. I just have 2 small kids and one on the way, so time is valuable right now, but seeing how bad this can turn so quickly has been a motivation. I almost had a lien placed and more. And they may have been sent, I can't really verify, but they did have my banking information and I know I didn't get any email about it, which I also know they had on file. As I said in another comment, the buck stops with me. I just personally don't feel like they made a good faith effort to remit payment, and when I called to try to make it right, there was zero working with me. This is just straight up greed here. I hate when you call a company and you can't get their representative and they just want to take your money but not help you out. Best of luck to you. What have I gotten myself into? Currently in inspection period for a new home in the HOA. Posted by HOA Rogue. I've been looking for a house in Miami for the last year. I finally found an amazing house. The price was a bit high, but the house is 15 minutes from my work. It's large and almost exactly what I wanted. The one negative. It's in an HOA. But this is simply a small gated community of 8 houses. The seller's broker said there aren't that many rules. The main point of the HOA is to maintain the gate, and the HOA hires gardeners to maintain all the front yard. All for a few $100 a year. It doesn't sound like the horror stories that I read on Reddit daily. So, our offer gets accepted, and my lawyer asked for the bylaws of the HOA while we are in the inspection period. After a few days, we get the amendments. But this isn't the main paperwork that we need. It takes 8 more days until we can finally get the primary HOA paperwork. We have no idea why it would take this long. The bylaws, in my opinion, well, aren't that bad. You bring in your garbage containers within 24 hours of pickup, quiet hours of 10:30 p.m. on weekdays and 12:30 a.m. on weekends. No chickens and roosters, no Airbnb, any assessments over $500 must be agreed on by the majority, and so on. I am older and past my partying years, so I'm all about the peace and quiet. There are additional rules that all the owners and tenants must be approved by the board, which is less great. I do like that there are no rules about adding a generator, colors a house may be, driveway rules, car must be in the garage, and so on. To me, this would be overreach. But my lawyer discovers that the HOA can't be making up most of the rules. The only thing they are allowed to govern, according to my lawyer after reading the paperwork, is the gate and common areas. He demanded that the board president answer how he thinks the board has the power to demand all of these rules. The lawyer is suggesting that the board has gone rogue. He is concerned about what other rules will the HOA come up with. We are now waiting for the response email. So now I am wondering if I screwed up. I have until Sunday, when inspection period ends, to make a decision. Did I mention that it's a really nice house? Important comments. Big one I see is requiring a membership vote for assessments over $500. That guarantees that the reserve fund will be underfunded and the HOA will be unable to pay for replacement of something that it's obligated to replace. It sounds like this is what may be going on. Once on the board, these people tend to develop an adversarial posture towards the other homeowners, imposing on the association their own personal standards of neighborhood appearance and homeowner deportment. They will micromanage your property through means of creative interpretation and outright embellishment of the CC&Rs. This sounds like the perfect mixture and storm of corruption and disaster for OP. Things could go so wrong, so if you do decide to stay at this awesome house, please be careful, OP. HOA harassment, posted by Aliens Talk to Me. I own a rental property. It's a second floor condo. Every so often, the neighbor below claims that I have a leak and he wants his plumber to repair my unit for free. Ha, no. I have a service plan with the highest rating plumbing company in our area. Each time they inspect my unit for leaks to repair, and no leaks are found. At first, I did not submit the paperwork to the HOA. And then the neighbor began forcing his way into the unit and showing up with a gang of men, or board members. I present the paperwork and they still declare my unit is leaking. Now I send all the paperwork online. They still say my unit is leaking and I just need to let the neighbor's plumber in to make free repairs. Now I have to threaten to call the police and have them arrested for trespassing and harassment. The HOA members in the email threaten to assist the neighbor below with pressing charges against me after they have inspection paperwork from the highest rated plumber in our area. The neighbor below has made all his plumbing repairs in his unit with his repairman and would have been unable to make any plumbing repairs upstairs. There is no documentation or inspection of his repairs. What are my legal options against the HOA for encouraging my neighbor's behavior? My current plumber currently has 19,417 reviews on Google and is rated at 4.9. I have multiple rental properties and each rep they send is amazing and professional, and that's why I continue to pay for their service plan. This comment says, perhaps the leak is in between the units. That may fall under the HOA's purview. OP says, I agree with you, but the neighbor downstairs allows his plumber to make undocumented and uninspected repairs, and the HOA is not being held accountable, and the HOA has never paid the neighbor for his repairs. I refuse to go along with it. I'm no lawyer, OP, and that's exactly why I'd get one to stand my ground against the HOA. Our HOA has been taken over by a rental company, posted by 3Cat Mafia. Our neighborhood in upstate South Carolina began construction in early 2020. We purchased our home in 2021 and moved in shortly thereafter when construction on our home was finally complete. We aren't completely satisfied with our house, but we got a low rate, and for a starter home, it isn't awful. The houses are close together, as is common for a new neighborhood these days, and construction was still ongoing for the rest of the neighborhood. We were told there would be about 120 houses total. About halfway into our time there, we received notice from the builder that the homes would no longer be property of the builder and that they would be turned over to a rental company and would no longer be for sale, but for rent instead. So there are about 40 or so homes that have been sold and the rest are rental homes. There were many questions at that time what that meant for us as homeowners, but we were assured that there would be no issues with the rental properties or the company at all, and that everything would be kept separate. Within the last 2 months, the rental company began to stage a takeover of the HOA without informing homeowners. One very involved homeowner caught wind and demanded a meeting. We have no official HOA board, which is kind of nice because we have no busybody HOA, no strong rules and whatnot. And a meeting took place last night. I was unable to attend, but apparently the rental company representatives did not show up. But since they have majority stake in the neighborhood, they automatically are able to take over the HOA. So every rule they apply to the rental properties in the neighborhood now apply to all of the owned properties in the neighborhood as well. So far, we are unsure what this means. Lawyers are being contacted. If I had known this was ever going to happen, I would not have bought here. It feels like a bait and switch. I was fine without almost absent HOA previously. I don't want to be subject to rental rules when I'm not even a renter. Oh my goodness, straight up your answer here is lawyer up. I mean, they are going way above where they should be, and this is something that's above your pay grade to be able to tackle by yourself. Let me know what you think. I forced 2 board members off of my HOA for thinking that they can pick on me in a meeting, posted by Brain Tumor Boy. I don't really pay attention to my homeowners association or HOA. It's a new community, under 2 years old, and I only went to my first meeting because a neighbor I've become buddies with told me that the HOA was being shady. My undergrad degree is in political science, so being a government structure and process nerd, I figured I'd check out the shenanigans for myself. At the meeting, one of the board members was being confronted about something that they had done. Initially, I had no clue what they were talking about, but by listening, I quickly understood the context and the scope. The board member responds to the questions by yelling and using pretty abusive language towards the residents who were asking him questions about what he did. That's a red flag. During his tirade, he told the people confronting him that he didn't answer to him. Second board member chimed in saying that we were powerless and repeats the "we don't have to answer to you." Second red flag. I'd had enough. I raise my hand, and the president, which is the nice board member and the good guy in general, recognizes me and he gives me the floor. Since it's my first time there, the fight paused and it got quiet. It was kind of weird. I simply but clearly told the 2 jerk board members that, in fact, we are the only people that they answer to in this role. The first jerk board member didn't like that and instantly threw abusive behavior towards me and started to try to bully me. Now, I'm a sleeping bear. I don't mess with anyone, but if someone messes with me, I make it my mission to let them know I can be the bigger jerk. After his response to me, another resident said to him, "We've lost faith in you. You should step down." The board member replied, "I've lost faith in you," which made absolutely no sense. A second resident said basically to step down or we'll recall you. The board member said, "You'll have to force me off." I then said, "Well, that's what we'll freaking do then, fine." In the next few days, I analyzed my state's HOA laws and my HOA's articles of incorporation, bylaws, and covenants. I realized the election of the 2 jerk board members was completely against the bylaws. So I wrote a demand letter to the HOA's attorney stating that the election of these 2 was in violation of our bylaws and they must be removed from the board. The attorney agreed with my analysis and the 2 members were forced off of the board. Anticlimactic, but go government structure and process nerds. HOA in the city contract, aka how the HOA got fined, posted by KiwiFox. So, some quick backstory to this. I don't live with an HOA, thank the divines, but I have had dealings with them. I studied environmental engineering in college, and I have a degree with a specialization in water treatment systems. Normally, though, that's not my day job. Even so, recently, a friend of mine who works with one of the neighboring cities asked me if I wouldn't mind doing some tests for water pollution in a waterfowl preservation area. There had been some strange die-off events going on, and the city was trying to figure out where the source of the pollution was coming from. I'd be operating under a special contract from the city, and I was given access to any location along this waterfowl area, within reason, to perform my test. I won't go into detail about how the tests work, they're involved and can be a pain in the butt, but suffice it to say that I started taking water and soil samples from likely sources along the waterfowl preserve's borders. This showed me that there was a notable amount of nitrates and phosphates in the water, which I surmised was affecting the birds. Now to find the source. I followed the river up its length, passing a number of housing sites, a couple of apartments, and the odd settling pond. Over the course of several weeks and a barrage of tests, these were ruled out as sources. The further I went up the river, though, the stronger the concentrations became, to the point that it was dangerous for humans to even be in contact with the water. We're talking Superfund type pollution. This was last summer. As I waded up along this area, I heard some splashing and the sounds of kids playing in the water. Not good. Not good at all. Turning the bend, I come face to face with the small dock leading into the water and 4 or 5 kids taking turns jumping off of it into the water. The heavily polluted, dangerous water. There's some lady sitting on the dock watching them, and I approached her. I forget the exchange, but it boiled down to me telling her that I'm from the city, and based on some of what had been found, the children were banned from swimming in the river. The lady tried arguing the point until I told her that I was calling the marshal, code enforcement, to have the area barricaded off, and she could explain her complaints to him. She grabbed the kids and scuttled off. Marshall did arrive, found that the dock was not built with the proper code standards, and condemned it, forcing the HOA who had built it to have it demolished within the week, or the city was going to do it and they'd front the bill. That still left the matter of the pollution. That's where things got weird. Once I passed this HOA subdivision, all pollution vanished. I must have done 5 or 6 further tests to verify this, but yeah, no pollution. So, I had my culprit. The next question was figuring out what they were doing. That's where my investigative side comes in. With the help of the marshal, I started going around the properties of the HOA talking with residents. It was a few simple questions like, do you know if they're fertilizing the grass? And when do they do this? And do you know the type of fertilizer they use? Just gathering evidence. Remember the lady from earlier? Turned out she was the HOA president. I only found this out after she called the police on the marshal and I, reporting strange men wandering around her neighborhood. She called them something like 4 times in a day before the police flat out told her they work with the city and if you keep calling, we're charging you. That didn't stop her from following us around in the car and taking photos of us with her phone. Eventually, we spoke with one older gentleman that broke the case, as it were. The HOA president had been fining people for not having perfectly green grass. We were in a drought at the time, so that's no surprise there. After several of the people in the subdivision got fined by the city for watering their grass, she had taken matters into her own hand. She first tried contracting a landscaper to spray the lawns with fertilizer, but due to various EPA regulations, he apparently refused. The homeowner couldn't be certain what the lady had done next, but a couple days after that, some guys turned up with a large farm-type trailer of liquid and sprayed every single foot of grass that the HOA controlled, even right down to the water's edge. With the homeowner's permission, I took several soil samples from around his property and then samples from the common area that joined the grassy area beside the river and the dock. It took about a week to get full results back, but I had my answer. This lady had some contractors or someone spraying farm-grade fertilizer on the grass. This particular fertilizer is heavily controlled by the EPA and requires a special license to even possess, much less use. I presented all my evidence to my contact at the city and laid out just how serious the damage was, and that I was legally obligated to report the HOA to the state regulatory board for gross violations. My contact took the papers and paid me for my services, thanking me, but also noting that if this went to court, I would need to testify about my findings. Epilogue. The court was originally scheduled for March of 2020, but it never came to that. The HOA president entered a plea deal with the state, where she and the HOA was required to pay for the environmental cleanup of the river, as well as restitution to the state. The fines alone topped close to $250,000, and the cleanup, still ongoing, is expected to break $1 million itself. The HOA president got the boot, while the HOA itself was, last I heard, facing being dissolved by the state due to multiple cases of negligence and inept management. I don't know how they came in contact with that fertilizer, though I suspect that some of the charges against the HOA president had something to do with that. Want to know the sad thing though? If the HOA had simply contacted the city or the state, they would have been given a list of approved fertilizers to use, which both wouldn't have polluted the surrounding water and wouldn't have put them on the hook for an environmental disaster. The number is right on the city and state's website. The HOA just couldn't be bothered to look it up. Ruining the HOA president millions of dollars of fines and then illegal stuff all on top of it, this is insane HOA madness. What do you think? Neighbor and HOA harassment, posted by Sean B. for Life. My coworker's neighbor behind him has been reporting him to their HOA for months now, getting them fined for literally nothing. The latest issue was having a fire pit on the back porch. The bylaw mentions you can't have an open fire or have fire pits in use, but grills are allowed. But the issue here is that the fire pit is not in use. Also, the picture presented to show the fireplace on the back porch comes from that neighbor's security camera that is directly pointed at his house. The entire view of the camera is all of only his property and nothing else. The houses are separated by a drivable alleyway too. This neighbor spies on him regularly. He sees him looking out at them all the time, day and night. And also, he trespasses on people's property to find reasons to report them. I told him to fight it because he's spying, privacy breaching, and the bylaw doesn't say that you can't own one or have one out, and harassment. Any other advice? A question and update from OP. Has he got children and have them out playing in the rear yard when he uses the grill? Then lay a charge of the neighbor creating inappropriate videos. OP replies, my coworker is in college renting the house with 7 other people. They all stay inside mostly and are quiet from the info that I'm given. This entire neighborhood is right next to their college. The position of the camera gathered from the photo evidence of breaking the bylaw has direct view of the back door, so every time it opens, you can see inside the entirety of the camera view, and from all shows only the upper half of my coworker's backyard along with his entire house. It does not show the alley street in between their houses or the owner of the camera's backyard. Are these normal houses in a suburb? Or are the HOAs gated communities with townhouses or something? Someone asked, and OP replied, it's a 3-street subdivision in a larger neighborhood. It's not gated. Wow, they seem incredibly intrusive for just a small house in a suburb. I get condos with shared common property needing them. They're seen as the downside of owning a condo and apartment here. Maybe because housing estates in the US have to maintain stuff that is maintained by the local council in other countries. The final update. So far now, he has been charged with the following: having a fire pit in view on the back porch. The bylaw states it can't be lit that close to the house, and we're fined for it being lit, which it wasn't, and without evidence. Having a hammock drilled into the tree in their backyard, but it was one of those wraparound tension ones. This had something to do about the destruction of the landscape. Continuous complaints about different cars parked in the driveway. I don't know how this is even a thing, but when you have 7 college students renting a house, it should be expected. Continuous noise complaints. Their neighbors on both sides throw parties all the time, so the HOA groups them all together. And the most recent was a fine for having the grill on the front porch. It was never on the front porch. I helped them move in and I took it straight to the back porch. It's too big and too heavy to just move to their tiny front porch. All of this is without any proof, and most of these fines are from bylaws that don't exist or what they wish they wrote in but didn't. As in, they have no grounds for these fines. All of them have been $50 to $100, which they have refused to pay and are usually dropped. The latest one with the grill was $750. Pretty steep in my eyes for an HOA fine. They even mentioned in their emails about the fire pit that the grill is the only thing allowed on the back porch and it never left the back porch. It is clear they're being targets by the HOA and their rear neighbor. Their landlord at this point is tired of the complaints and wants them all out. This feels like a group thing, like they're all in on it. I told him to take legal action. Is there any legal action to take? Any ground to stand on? I know HOAs can pretty much do what they want sometimes. This would make me uncomfortable. What about you? Neighbor dropped her $50 on the ground in the parking lot, accused me of stealing it. The police are involved. With an update in the comments posted by Elizabeth Honey. Neighbor is a female in her 30s and accused me, 30 female, of stealing her dropped money in a parking lot where we park our cars. I pulled up to park after getting coffee this morning and she's outside in her car. She asked me if I've seen her $50 and I say, no, I haven't. But if I found it, I'll let you know. So I go inside and give my coffee to the boyfriend and then I took my dog out. While I was taking my dog out, she was banging on my door. And when boyfriend answered, she was saying that I stole her money and kept accusing me of stealing her money when he said that I didn't steal her money. And if I found it on the ground, I would have told him. She continued accusing me and was clearly upset. She then asked, where did I get the money for the coffee then? Like what? She thinks I don't have money to buy coffee in the morning. Just so odd all around and honestly a crazy thing to ask. Boyfriend called her a B and she called me a crackhead. Boyfriend went to apologize for calling her a B and just wanted to squash it and say that I wouldn't take anybody's money. She then slammed the door on his face and said that she was calling the police. The police came and basically asked what's going on and if I took her money. I told him no, up and down, that I didn't, and they said, okay, we're going to check the cameras. I replied, okay, great, just please check the cameras. They kept using the word, if I stole her money, and I just broke down and started crying because I felt like I was being accused for something that I didn't do because he used the word if at least 4 times. Finally, boyfriend says, listen, she said that she didn't do it. You don't need to keep saying if, and I said, please go check the tapes. So they did, and then they obviously told her. Then her husband comes home from work and finds me on my porch and again comes right up to my home and asks about the altercation that happened with his wife. I said that she accused me of stealing and he immediately wanted to talk to boyfriend and was very angry. I said that the cops were already called. I did not take her money. You guys can watch the cameras. This is over. Please stop harassing me. And at this point, I'm getting extremely upset and emotional. And he said, no, I'm the police now. Whatever that's supposed to mean. I filed a harassment thing with my apartment complex because of this so that I could document some paper trail. My boyfriend's at work and I don't know what's going to happen when he gets home. But these people are crazy. I'm assuming that he's angry that boyfriend called her a B, but she was being one by the way that she was acting and he even apologized after. I am just upset. Being accused of something that I didn't do and would never do. When she told me that she lost it, I felt bad. She didn't accuse me then when she asked me, so I just really don't get it. This whole thing sucks. I needed to vent. What would you guys do now? And by the way, I live in an apartment complex. They live in the 2nd floor and we're the bottom floor. I'm nice to everybody. They blast music all day and night from their cars and porches, and I never say a word or have ever complained. Somebody makes a legal suggestion to OP, and OP replies with an update. Commenter says, "You have proof. Management has proof. Have the police check with the management for that proof. Ignore these people. If they continue to harass you, call the police on them, and then tell them you're being harassed and you do not feel safe. Hugs and support your way. Sorry you had a bad day." OP updates with, "The police did check the cameras and they told me that they would tell her that I called them for an update, but the sheriff never called me back. Yeah, I don't know what to do. Her husband wants to talk to boyfriend and I just really don't want it to turn sour. I have no idea what he is going to say to him or what. But he just seemed to want to talk to him like he was ticked, and I don't know what these people are capable of." I filed a harassment report and I wrote down what happened, and I said that I felt harassed at the end. I mean, these people are knocking on my door, yelling at me. Basically, it's insane, and calling the cops on me. Now, her boyfriend wants to get involved with mine? Just insane. I am so over it. My boyfriend is not the type to hold his tongue, but I have begged him to because I just want this to be over. This story makes you realize never take good neighbors for granted because the bad ones can be literally insane. Being considered an unauthorized boarder by the HOA, posted by Motive Labrosse, with updates and drama in the comments. Well, over a decade ago, I was forced to move back in with my dad. I was only planning to stay a few months till I was financially stable enough to get my own place once again. But my dad insisted that I stay rent-free while I got my car paid off and some serious dental work done. This lasted 4 years. My dad owns a really nice place in a subdivision that had an HOA. For about 2 of those 4 years, things went fine, until a woman who I shall aptly call Karen became head of the HOA. Me and Karen had many unfortunate run-ins in the past. She would constantly ask my dad how long until I move out. Then she would always report me and my dad to the HOA for the silliest things, which the HOA would usually ignore or at best dismiss after getting our side of the story. But now that she was in control, she took direct action. The first was to declare me an unauthorized boarder after instituting a bylaw that all adults 21 and older in a household have to be registered with the HOA as a permanent resident with a minimum of 5 years that they have to stay without penalizing the homeowner. My dad refused to do any such thing because I would eventually be getting my own place. But Karen insisted, even serving him 2 years of backdated penalties for having me there. My dad ended up having to spend money on a lawyer to send her a cease and desist order because I was legally grandfathered in since I was there before the bylaw. Of course, the fines were begrudgingly dropped, but afterwards, she would try to nickel and dime my dad with constant little things like me being out at all hours of the night, well, I worked late, or the way I dressed in public being inappropriate, jeans and a band t-shirts mostly, and other stupid crap that most of which weren't in the bylaws. She even took to using a selfie stick over the fence to see if there was anything in the backyard violating the rules. I since moved out of there, and a year or so later, Karen was voted out of the HOA after ticking off the wrong people. Update and drama. One commenter asked OP, "I'd like to know what person held the gun to your head and said that you must move back in with your dad. Chances are, it sounds like you messed up in life, and this was the easy and convenient thing for you to do. Yes, this HOA was bad, but do a bit of self-reflecting and come to terms with the fact that this wouldn't have even been a thing if it wasn't for your life decisions." And OP fires back with, "Nice to know you're freaking psychic. If you must know, there was some bad blood between me and my at-the-time roommate's psychopath, now ex-wife, and it got to the point that I didn't feel safe living in the same apartment with her. The lease had to be broken, and it drained me out of a ton of cash. My pop was good enough to give me a temporary roof over my head. Otherwise, I'd be homeless. I was only planning on spending a couple months at my pop's place till I was on my feet, but he insisted that I stay until my car was paid off and I got some much needed dental work done. Crazy story, and be sure not to assume things about people's situation, right? You know what they say that makes you. HOA asking for personal funds to repay a loan? Help! Posted by Quiet Excitement 365. I recently purchased a condo in a community governed by a homeowners association, or HOA, about a month ago, and now I find myself facing a concerning situation. The HOA is asking all residents, including myself, to contribute a lump sum of money to repay a massive $1.6 million loan. Here's some background info. The current reserve fund stands at $1.3 million, which includes the special assessment funds and all asset accounts. Apparently, a previous assessment was conducted in 2021, which I wasn't a part of, to repay the reserves for the down payment of the loan. The intention was to increase the budget gradually, hoping that, over time, we could repay the loan. Unfortunately, due to multiple water-related issues within the neighborhood, the reserves were never replenished, and the increasing budget couldn't cover the remaining 3/4 of the loan. Now, the HOA is proposing this special assessment solely to cover the remaining portion of the loan owed to the bank. If approved, I am being told that the funds raised from this assessment will be held in a designated account and used for monthly payments to the bank until March 2027, ensuring accountability regardless of any management or board changes. The idea is that this special assessment allows homeowners to finance the completed improvement using a fixed-term loan at a relatively low interest rate of 3.5%, as opposed to permanently increasing homeowner dues. Is this normal? Secondly, the HOA has presented us with a dire warning. Without this special assessment or significant budget increases exceeding 30%, they claim our community cash flow projection for the next 12 months is grim, and the HOA could run out of money. They argue that reduced funds on the balance sheet and income statement would negatively impact potential buyers who require substantial reserve funds for mortgage approval. What? I wish they could all pay it off with what they have right now, but OP, I do not envy you in this situation, and I hope that you guys can stand your ground against this HOA. HOA harassing me over security cameras and lights, posted by Bearded Trucker. My wife and I bought a house in an HOA back in May of 2020. We bought it from family and was told the HOA is very relaxed, to say the least. Basically, pay your dues and submit the proper documentation when doing major changes to the house and landscaping. We received the rules and regulations when we bought the house, and it was very generic, nothing in it mentioning security cameras and motion lights. Well, this past Monday, my father-in-law and I finally installed 2 security cameras and lights. We had to run new electric lines due to the house not coming with the doorbell. Tuesday afternoon, we received a warning about modifications to the house without prior approval. We already had 4 motion sensor lights up months prior to installing the camera. Well, I figured they just want a statement or something similar to explain why we put up the new system. I submit the statement and I don't hear anything back for a couple of days. The response I finally got was that the cameras needed to be removed, paperwork submitted, and then they can be reinstalled. After spending 6 hours running wire and installing the system, I'm not pulling it down, and I will not be changing anything until I get a response to my submission. If it wasn't mentioned in the rules and the regulations, I figure they really don't have a leg to stand on in general. Now to summarize, we have 4 motion sensor lights and 2 cameras. It's a single family home. I think they are just giving me pushback due to me trying to get them to equally enforce a ban on commercial vehicles. Very interesting comment. HOAs hate private security cameras because they like to screw with people's property up when they aren't around to teach them a lesson. They prefer to put security cameras all over the neighborhood that are under their control, so the footage can be corrupted anytime it's useful. Also, so they can use them to spy on everyone and make sure they're following the Führer's decrees. You worthless proles are the ones paying for these cameras, by the way, with your monthly dues. I seriously have no idea why HOAs aren't classified as a protection racket. I don't know about you, but security cameras are a good thing to have in a neighborhood, not a bad one. What do you think? This next HOA story is special. It's a complete middle finger to the HOA, and it's really funny too, and it was told in my comment section in a video. Let's call it, "I'll Fix Your Wagon." I used to live in an HOA. It was one of 2 condos with a fenced-in backyard. I needed a tree removed because the HOA was in charge of keeping the buildings and the exterior of the property up to HOA standards. They refused to pay to have the tree removed and put it in writing that everything that went on in my backyard was my responsibility. I thought to myself, I'll fix your wagon. I removed the tree at my expense. I then planted a crooked willow tree. Since my water bill was covered in my HOA dues and willow trees drink a lot of water, the hose was on almost all the time. I then planted some dwarf fruit trees, put in a faux lawn. I didn't want to mow it. I had a huge screened-in gazebo built. I also painted the exterior walls a pastel green up to the belly band. Our condos were 2-story units, main living areas downstairs, and the bedroom and bathroom upstairs, half bath downstairs. The belly band I painted was a nice mauve color. I used to sunbathe in my fenced-in backyard with a 6-foot-high cedar fence. I went to an HOA meeting and someone complained about the colors that I painted the back of my condo. They complained about the willow tree, which was growing larger than they wanted, and someone else complained about a man sunbathing in his backyard. I told the HOA that whatever I chose to do in my fenced-in backyard was my business, and they couldn't do anything about it. I had copies of the signed paperwork stating that I could do anything I wanted in my backyard. Furthermore, I wanted the name of the person complaining about my sunbathing because they would have to look over my 6-foot fence to see my backyard, and therefore they were peeping Toms and I wanted them arrested. The HOA apologized, and after that, I did whatever I wanted. Upon leaving that meeting, I simply said, "Don't you think it would have been better if you would have just removed that tree to begin with? You tried to save a few bucks, but screwed yourselves in the end." I have since sold my condo, and last summer I drove past my old condo and noticed that the willow tree was about 50 feet tall and more than shaded my backyard. I just laughed and kept on driving. Yep, I fixed their wagon. If that's just not a malicious compliance middle finger slap in the face to the HOA, I don't know what is. Way to go, and thank you for sharing that story. I thoroughly enjoyed it. This story has an update. It's called "Left for Work This Morning. Neighbor demanded I park in my driveway so that she could have more room in the morning waiting on the school bus with her child." Posted by Cakes and Games 90. Said child is at least in middle school because that's the bus that runs the time that I'm leaving for work. And I would know, as I taught at the middle school in the district the last 3 years before moving on to a new one. First, I hate bus stop parents. Why? Because they litter. They just toss trash out their windows into our lawn like they own the place. They also wait outside our house with their music blaring, and they're always out at the bus stop 15 to 20 minutes early. Then they block your mailbox or driveway with their cars. So, I already do not like these people. Their kids aren't even annoying, just the adults. But we parked on the street this weekend, which is unusual for us. We did it because we are building a fence and have stuff in our driveway for it. This is the first time since I've lived here for over a year that I've ever left my car on the street overnight. Random lady pulls up behind me and stops me as I'm loading in my things for work and says our vehicles are in the way of parents waiting on the bus for their kids. She said that we should park in our driveway and leave the road open for parents. Didn't ask, just said, "Tomorrow these spaces will be open for parents, okay?" Then I just walked away. So, needless to say, we will be parking on the street until further notice. My husband has 2 trucks, so that means even more room will be taken. Update. Parked on the street. Got the stank look from the same person. She drove past and looked our vehicles up and down and shook her head. She ended up parking on the main street instead. Ours is off the main street in the neighborhood, so we don't get all the traffic from people going to work. We just have a corner lot. Fun fact about one of my husband's trucks though, it's a work truck from his company. So anytime you have to use public parking, such as street parking, you have to put a cone 5 feet in front and one 5 feet behind it per company policy, even if you're at your house. This Karen is crazy. What do you think? HOA moved in on my uncle, posted by Lil Bit Evil. About 25 years ago, my aunt and uncle moved into a new construction single-family home neighborhood on a half an acre. About 6 months after they moved in, he was informed that his neighborhood was being taken over by an HOA. He disregarded his HOA application as he did not wish to join. Not long after this, random neighbors began complaining to him directly about his boat and the cars in his driveway, violating HOA rules. He just informed the often rude people that he was not a member, that they would argue with him that everyone was a member. One of the major issues is that his driveway, garage, and front yard was on the main level of his home, and the backyard dropped down a cliff to level with his basement and backyard. So he had no way to back his boat around the side of the home into the backyard. Eventually, the HOA began harassing him with threats if he didn't move his boat to the backyard. His backyard had been closed off by a vinyl fence. The HOA installed and lined another road back there. So one day, my uncle decided to compromise by trying to take down a section of his back fence so he could make a gate for boat parking access. The HOA called the police on him for destruction of property. The police left my uncle with a warning if the fence was returned to proper condition by the end of the day. Uncle put the fence back up and placed his boat back in the front driveway. Now the fines started coming, week after week, month after month. When the fines reached $10,000, the HOA filed a lawsuit against him. He countersued for the harassment and the street access to his backyard. In court, the HOA showed the HOA boundary and showed my uncle's house was in the middle of the HOA, explained the violations, and the police report filed over the back fence. My uncle explained that he never signed up for the HOA. He moved into the neighborhood before the HOA existed, never gave them permission to fence in his backyard, provided all mortgage documentation and a blank HOA application with the HOA security stamp and date. The HOA argued that it didn't matter if he didn't turn in his application because he was within the HOA's borders. The judge declared my uncle's property was grandfathered as private property and not part of the HOA. The HOA was to immediately take down their illegal fence on the back border of my uncle's lot. Since the HOA had fined my uncle $10,000 and more in illegal fines, my uncle was owed over $10,000 in damages for the harassment. My uncle rebuilt his yard fence in see-through chain link with a gate where he parks all his toys in full view. He moved the boat from the driveway to his front lawn, let the lawn die, and paved it over, all 10 feet from his front door to the sidewalk. The HOA neighbors in the decades since still approach him to complain, and he just tells them to take a walk, knowing there is nothing they can do to him. This is beautiful. Normally the HOA tries to run over you and take advantage, but no, he stood their ground and won. Nice job. HOA mistakes me for my cousin's wife, posted by Deleted. Back when I was 18, I'm 26-year-old female now, I was helping my cousin, 30 male, and his newlywed wife, 25 female, move into their new home that has an HOA. I was carrying boxes into the house, and I was just covered in sweat. As I was enjoying some rest with a bottle of water, one of the HOA members came up to me to introduce himself. We exchanged pleasantries and then asked, "How long have you and your husband been married?" After that, I told him to please wait and brought in the actual married couple to meet the HOA member. They came out and the man's face dropped. Then he faked a phone call from the HOA and left. We didn't know anything was wrong at the time. Not even a week after they moved in, I get a call on my cell phone from my cousin. He said that the police were raiding his house for possible drugs. I know my cousin. He has a criminal record of a Boy Scout. Every time he gets a prescription for painkillers, he either shreds the note or dumps the pills in the toilet due to fear of addiction. The police found nothing and left, and they did apologize. The very next day, his wife was stopped by the police in her own driveway. They said that she was suspected for prostitution, even though she was wearing a pantsuit from her job as a cardiologist. They called her hospital to confirm her whereabouts, and she was let go. The police came back the day after that after someone claimed that his wife was breaking into their own home. How can someone break into their home through the front door and with their own keys? After a month, the HOA came up to them claiming that they are a nuisance and attempted to put a lien on the house for so many calls to the police. Luckily, my cousin's brother is a lawyer and fought against the lien in court. At court, the HOA member that met the couple on day one was revealed to be the one that sent the cops after them so they can be kicked out of the neighborhood. As it turns out, that person testified that he didn't want their kind in his perfect neighborhood. Everyone in that room was dumbstruck. The HOA lawyer immediately dropped the case, apologized to my cousin and his wife. That HOA member was kicked out of the neighborhood for racism. As it turns out, he also called the police on every black and brown person that even passed by his house. Since then, they moved out of the neighborhood after she got a better job offer in her field. I forgot to say, she is black and my cousin is white. That's blatant racism, and the HOA member deserves the punishment that he received. Nightmare HOA story time. RBF 2000 says, my at-the-time girlfriend, now wife, rented a townhouse with friends in a community that had an HOA. There was parking reserved for guests of the tenants. Ironically, parking was always an issue for my wife and her roommates, but always simple for me. I just popped on the visitor's pass and I was good to go in that lot. I spent the night probably once or twice a week, and one day I awoke to find my car missing. After some ace detective work, I found out that my 10-year-old, at the time, 5-speed manual transmission Honda had not been stolen, but just towed. When I reached out to the HOA, they told me that there was a provision in the bylaws that said a car could only be parked in a visitor spot for a maximum of 72 hours, and that a board member submitted my car to a list of cars to be towed due to abusing a visitor's pass. They argued the language in the bylaws was such that the total amount of time that a car may be parked in the visitor's lot was 72 hours, non-consecutively. For example, if you park there once a week for 10 hours each week, on the 8th week we are in violation of the policy. This in opposition to the clear purpose of the provision, which is to prevent people from storing their cars in the lot. They summarily denied my request at the next HOA meeting to recover the $150 towing fee. Long story short, I sued them in small claims court and got back the towing fee plus court cost. Plus, they engaged a lawyer, so I feel good about wasting some of their retainer as well. Deleted says, we live in a condo and began receiving $100 fines for not picking up dog poop. The area behind our building is a common area, and lots of people walk their dogs around. I offered to submit DNA testing for my dogs, and they ignored me and continued to send notices of fines. I began taking my phone with me on every walk and took photos and videos of me picking up dung with timestamp evidence. I sent a folder full of photos to the HOA with photographic evidence that I was picking up after my dogs. We continued to receive fines. I got a small trash can and kept on my patio, and I began saving my bags of dog crap for 2 weeks. I did tie the bags, but they were still obviously smelly as dung bags are very thin plastic. I then mailed a box of them to the HOA office along with copies of time-stamped photos showing I had picked it up. I told them that I had better not ever receive another fine for dog crap because I had provided more than sufficient evidence that it was not us. Miraculously, the fines stopped and we haven't received any for over 2 years. Debaser626 says, I rented a house in an HOA. It wasn't too bad, just normal stuff, but every now and then some board members would tool around and hand out fines for dirty driveways and such. I wouldn't have cared if the president and a board member didn't live on the same street as me and their driveways were in massive disrepair. The board member's son did some work on his truck and there was a massive oil spill, partly covered with a red towel that sat there for 8 months. while a few rust-colored streaks on our concrete was worthy of a fine. The funniest was when the HOA decided to install very aggressive speed bumps. The ones that were there previously were fine. They were graded to not be too jarring, but required that you slow down. The only accident that occurred while we were there was the spouse of an HOA board member driving drunk and plowing into a tree. But there were always notices and mailings for people to slow down, as this is not a racetrack. I guess they felt adding in a couple of literal asphalt curbs in the middle of the street would show people who dared to drive over 10 miles per hour on the main road. The only way over these things without feeling like you were going to break something on your car was to ease up on the first side, come to a complete stop then, and then slowly ease down the drop, once the front wheels and then another for the rear. Some people had just taken to driving on the grass around them, so they put up concrete barriers there. After a few weeks, someone decided to pour diesel fuel on the speed bumps the day before the garbage truck did their rounds. The speed bumps got completely destroyed. The HOA reinstalled the bumps and somehow made them even more aggressive, and a week later, Captain Diesel struck again. They yanked them out again and just paved over the holes. It was beautiful. They did end up installing speed bumps a few months later, but they went with the stock plastic ones that bolt to the street, which was much more preferable to the man-made cliffs of Dover that were there previously. Naigung says, I would sit in my yard with my dog between 4 and 6 p.m. every Friday for 3 months. Why? Because the HOA would measure my grass every frickin' Friday. My lawn guy was the best and I refused to switch. However, he could only come on Saturday. The HOA let us choose which day we inspected, and everyone voted for Saturdays. They secretly vetoed it for Fridays, but claimed it was Saturday that they were coming. To prove this, I sat with my dog every Friday waiting for him. He would park, wait a while, and then go to another street and measure there. My street was the only one who didn't receive fines for breaking the agreement. It became a party when everyone figured out what I was doing. People would cook out in the front and we would all go throw coals on and food as needed. I got reported for something or other after the 3-month marker, so I brought my supercut 3 months of time stamped videos and submitted them to the HOA distribution list before I went to meet with them. There were 40 or 50 people there because we had organized a day to go and air grievances. It was maybe the best time I ever spent with any HOA. Gimp2X says, Upscale Beach neighborhood repeatedly refused my solar panel application, cited the location of them as being an eyesore, which was atop of the back side of my house, not visible from the street, and fought me at 4 different meetings, delaying my installation, ultimately cited the state law, and they immediately backed down and amended their covenants. P.S. A clothesline is a solar collection device, and they cannot deny you use of that either. So, if you want to play dirty, hang a bunch of beach towels in your yard. OP's mom and dad say, I lived in a neighborhood with a park in the center, located directly behind my back fence. The entire neighborhood was managed by the same HOA company, but the neighborhood was officially set up as 2 different HOA communities. Even though it was on the other side of my fence, the park was designated as part of the community that I was not in. On multiple occasions, the irrigation system in the park broke and completely flooded my backyard. 3 or 4 times over a span of a few months, I woke up to literally 1.5 feet of water. Over time, my brick fire pit literally sank into the ground, an entire layer of brick. Water came into my kitchen on 2 of the occasions, and every time my home's foundation looked weaker and weaker after cleanup. I called to complain to the HOA each time. The flooding almost always happened on a weekend, and it wouldn't be until Monday that they came out, leaving my home flooded for a minimum of 2 days each time. After the 3rd or 4th complaint, I finally reported them to the BBB and the Water Authority, and I sent a video to the local news. The next business day, the head of the HOA company called me furious. Despite all the pictures and videos that I'd sent, she said she was convinced I was making it all up. When I pressed her why she thought that, she specifically said it was because the park can't be flooding your house, it's not even part of the same HOA community that you live in. Scott Evil 110 says, "We've only been part of an HOA for the last few months, and it's already living up to every stereotype I ever had in my head. They held our once annual meeting with very little notice, and like 6 people showed up. They elected a new association and immediately decided to spend $700 on dog crap receptacles, even though like 4 people have dogs, and the whole neighborhood is on one street." This sparked an incredible amount of drama. One guy on the HOA decided he was going to get super defensive when people started questioning this decision, and it quickly devolved into him just taunting people on Facebook because he was on the board and they weren't, and if they didn't like his authority, they should change the bylaws. Then someone left a bunch of dog crap in his driveway. Then he resigned from the HOA. No word on those dog receptacles. This has all happened in the past 3 days. This one's got a follow-up post. It's called, "Would I be the butt for reporting an HOA member to the board for yelling at my friend about a mailbox color violation on my property?" Posted by Steve at Steve. I'm 19-year-old male and mom live in an HOA community that dictates the color of the mailboxes. They must be black. I recently had to put a new one in after the door broke off of our old one. While I did not know about the rule, and I put in a white mailbox. Fast forward to this afternoon. A retired man who lives in the neighborhood recently volunteered to help the board enforce violations. He does a drive every few weeks to check up on houses. Well, today he went down my street as my friend, also 19 male, pulled in the drive to work with me in my basement. He texted me that he is here. Before he made it up to my door, the friend told me the HOA dude walks up to him and starts to ask him questions, says he is in direct violation of an HOA code. My friend tells him he does not live there and the HOA dude doesn't buy it. It's been a few minutes now, so I assume that I forgot to unlock the door and he's stuck outside. When I open the door, I hear HOA dude pulling the "Do you know who I am?" card. He's raising his voice when I butt in, also not knowing much about him. He goes off about the mailbox to me and how it's making the neighborhood look bad. I told him I'm unaware of it and I will talk to my mom about painting it when she gets off work. His tone shifted. He legitimately thought 2 19-year-old kids owned a $300,000 house, had no idea that my mom owned it. Things then go full bonkers mode. Dude started to cover his tracks to me, saying that my friend was the one with the attitude and sarcastically answering questions and was full of crap. In reality, my friend was confused on why some dude approached him talking about a mailbox. He calls us violators and leaves, and we both just laughed. I asked my mom on what to do, and she said it's up to me since I'm an adult now. I'm leaning towards reporting the guy due to his condescending tone, unprofessional behavior, and raising his voice at my friend who is genuinely just very confused about what's going on. I don't even think he knows what an HOA is. My friend and I joked about it once he left, but still, I don't want another person in our neighborhood to get yelled at like that. I wish one of us had taken a video to show as evidence of behavior. Most of the board is actually quite reasonable, so I could see him getting kicked out if I do report him. Would I be the butt for reporting his behavior? I did end up sending an email to the HOA and they informed me that he is facing disciplinary actions, whatever that means. My main concern was the HOA volunteer letting the power get to his head and yelling at other younger people in the neighborhood. Also, I did paint the mailbox in order to comply. He shouldn't have been a jerk. Nice job on reporting him, OP, and I hope that he leaves you alone and gets in trouble or whatever has to happen. You know what they say about assuming, right? Sue me for that 100. Dare you? Posted by John Poker Clan. This is a while back in the mid-90s. I owned a condo in Las Vegas. I bought it new and I lived in it. I don't recall how long ago I had lived there when I received a letter from the HOA asking me for my address. I just ignored it. A few weeks or so later, I received a letter stating that I had been fined $100 for not returning that other letter. I went down to the office to visit the HOA president, and I said exactly this to him. The only way I will pay this fine is through judgment, because I want to see you explain to a judge how you sending a letter to my address to verify my address and then fining me because you did not receive a response is going to fly with a judge. The reaction was priceless. He thought for a minute, and then he conversed with the other person there, which is probably an HOA board member maybe, I don't know. And then he said to her, "Could we have misplaced his letter?" Okay, no, fine. His reply was simply disjointed. I never said I did not send the letter. I simply said I was not paying the fine without judgment in small claims. He was just pulling BS. Great comment and reply from OP. Comment says, "What kind of idiot writes a letter to you asking for your address?" Probably the same kind of idiot that texts you asking for your phone number or emails you asking for your email address. True story, got a letter from Bank of America saying they were closing my credit card because they didn't have my address on file. And OP says, "Your reply reminded me of a little joke we played on a desk clerk at a sleepy hotel and casino that I was shift manager at. My buddy, the security guard, went up to a room and called down to the desk complaining about the phone in the room that it was not working. It was at least a half an hour before the look of clarity came across her face." HOA hates the sound of freedom, posted by Russer. I live in a township, so in Ohio, that means I can hunt and shoot on my own property. I also live next to an HOA, but not in it. I also have some crazy neighbors who seem to think that my property is their property. Example, I live on 2.5 acres, and I'd probably say 70% of it is wooded with a large amount of 100 to 150 plus year old trees. I had just moved in back in March, and one of the first things I did was walk around my property and locate and remark all of my property stakes to know exactly what was mine. I also marked all of the standing trees that were dead and needed to be cut down. And then a police car shows up because of one of my crazy neighbors that I have caught multiple times trespassing on my property. Thinks that my trees are apparently her trees and didn't want me cutting down the dead ones. So on 4th of July week this year, a bunch of guys from work asked me if I wanted to go shooting at a local outdoor range. When I asked what range it was, I told them no. Why don't you all come over to my house and we can shoot for free and not have to drive for an hour to a crappy range? And they asked, "Well, what about my neighbors?" And I said, "Screw them. That's exactly why I bought this property, to do whatever the heck I want." So I posted on the local neighborhoods group to give everybody a heads up. If they hear a bunch of gunfire on that Friday afternoon, there's no need to freak out. I was just using my range with some friends. And of course, that's when the fun started. There was a good mix of people saying great, wish they could come, and then a bunch of the HOA busybodies complaining that I can't do that and the noise would be offensive and they have rules against that, and so on. Now flash forward to the Thursday before, and I'm out in my yard setting up all of my steel plate targets on my 100-yard range when I see a police car pull in my driveway again. So the sergeant says, "You can probably guess why I'm here," laughing. And I said, "Yeah, I probably have a good idea." He says, "I just want to start off saying, you are 100% right, and you can shoot and hunt on your own property, and it's not a problem. But since we had a bunch of calls, I wanted to stop out here and talk with you. That way, we don't have to bother you at all during your shoot tomorrow." He says he just wanted to stop out, introduce himself, meet me, and take a look at the range real quick, and everything looked great. So this way, come Friday, if they get a bunch of calls into dispatch, they won't have to send anybody out, and they can just let everybody know on the phone call that everything's legal. So Friday comes along, and about 6 guys from work show up, and we went through probably 1,000 plus rounds in a couple of hours, from 22s all the way up to my 50 BMG that I let them play with. 2 of the guys brought some guns with binary triggers, so we were doing some 30-round mag dumps for fun as well. Later that night, I go back on the website to see what the posts were like, starting off with, "Sounds like the party started," smiley face, along with people whining and making complaints that they had called the police and were told that everything was legal and there was nothing for them to do, and then they commented with, "Well, I guess the police won't do anything until somebody's shot." Yes, that's right. Newsflash, the police don't arrest you for pre-crime. That would be like them pulling you over for speeding before you've left your driveway because you might speed down the road. Comments and a cool update from OP. Captain Dropbear says, "You should offer the police use of your range for training once in a while." I could just imagine the Karen's faces. "Hello police, there are people having fun firing guns coming from the neighbors, blah blah blah, ree." Yes, we're the police, we know it's us, we're practicing our Karen tasering skills, goodbye." And OP replies, The funny thing is, when I was talking to the officer that was here and we were discussing guns, I had mentioned that I was going to be attending the NRL 22 National Championships, and he noticed the stock on one of my rifles, and it turns out that he and his son own the company that makes a custom cheek rest used on one of my stocks. OP did it by the book, he did it on his property, and had a fun 4th of July week. Way to go, OP. HOA insists my sister and I are not a single-family household, and one of us should have to move out. We've lived here all of our lives. With an update posted by TG Lico. I'm 21 and my sister is 19. We've lived in this house our entire lives. Our parents bought this house 27 years ago. They joined the HOA about 15 years ago. My dad died 5 years ago and mom died 6 months ago. We are now the owners of this house. We've been visited by the HOA multiple times. They're citing that we're not a single-family home anymore since our mom has died. They've told us that according to the terms, only a single family can be resident in the homes, and being single family is defined as a person or couple and their legal unmarried children. This meant that my mom could live with me and my sister as it was a single family according to the definition, but me and my sister living here after our mom's death means we are two families of single adults. They want one of us to move out so that this place becomes a single family home again. They visit us 4 times now asking us to leave. They say they don't like to sue out of respect for our parents, but they will do that if we continue to refuse to comply by the community rules. Can they kick out one of us out of our own house? What should we expect and how can we fight this? The update. So I first confirmed that they are from the HOA, not just some people harassing us for the fun of it. We also got the CC&R of the HOA, which included a clause about single family and its weird definition. If it included partners and children, grandchildren, parents and grandparents, step-parents, children, uncles, all of that, but no siblings. It even had a clause that said co-owners are not allowed to live there unless they are a single family based on the definition. We also received a letter from them telling us of our violation and demanding us to comply. So my sister and I went around the neighborhood and gave copies of the terms and the letter we received to everyone and told them, imagine you died tomorrow. Do you want them to kick out your kids? Because they're doing it to us. They will do it to your kids as well. Help us stop them. We gathered signatures and had almost everyone contact the president and demand this should stop. Within 2 weeks, we received a letter that says this has been a mistake with an apology. We learned that this HOA is horrible to everyone, not just us. So there are now people preparing to run for the HOA board to replace the current members, and they're promising to have a referendum about whether the HOA should be dissolved or not, because it really is doing nothing of substance except being a pain in the butt of everyone. Now, I know I'm no lawyer, this isn't legal advice, but I hope that this HOA just falls down because they did not deserve to be this mean to everyone. Holy cow, man. HOA isn't even a legal entity, posted by Immediate Ad 7638 with an update. Hello, friends. Hubs and I just bought 10 acres in northern Michigan. It's part of an HOA that has maybe 15 lots, and only 8 of them have any homes. It's a rural area. I'm writing here because I'm beginning to think the HOA is not even a legal entity, and they're just charging us annual dues and pocketing it, and I'm not sure what to do. Here are my red flags. Firstly, it's run by a husband and a wife, no third person. Michigan law requires 3 people on the board of an HOA. Secondly, I've emailed this husband and wife team asking for these documents, and they have become unresponsive. The best response that I got was that they sent me the building restrictions list, but no governing documents. All my other questions were replied to in a friendly and helpful manner, but they completely ignore my request for articles of incorporation. So I also cannot find this HOA on the Secretary of State's website, which is the legal directory of all the HOAs in the state, which also has all the founding documents for all the HOAs included on the site. I can find the neighboring HOA, but not mine. Michigan law says that all HOAs have to have an annual meeting, keep minutes, and vote for new board members and so on. This HOA hasn't had a formal meeting in years. They actually said that in the annual newsletter. Now, since there were 2 new property owners in the community, they decided to have a meeting, which I couldn't attend because I work Sundays. When I asked for the minutes, I was told it was just a get-to-know-you casual thing, and there were no minutes. Dues are only $50 a year. However, there is literally nothing the HOA does for the community. There's no public easements or parks, there's zero HOA maintenance on anything in the community, and the snowplow doesn't even plow the street that I'm building on. We even have to hook up our own electric, septic, and well. Now, there is a single official document in the LIBOR of the county, but all that it has are building restrictions like rules about fences and siding and so on. But there is literally nothing else legal, official, or otherwise that I can find about this HOA. I did have to write the dues check to HOA name, but that's the only indication I have that it's a legal business. They have to have a business bank account and legally registered business to cash that check. Since the husband and wife and the directors and members of the board will not respond to my request for documentation, I'm considering my next steps. Here's what I'm thinking to do. Would love thoughts and opinions. I'm going to begin documenting all my requests for documentation. Now it's been via email, so it's already documented and considered a request in writing. Next up, I'm going to send a registered letter formally requesting this documentation. Then I'm going to file a formal complaint with the Secretary of State, which governs HOAs and handles complaints in Michigan. I'm going to get a real estate attorney to force these documents and/or to secede from the HOA due to lack of compliance with all the legal procedures. I don't like the idea of stirring the pot with this HOA, as the husband and wife are our neighbors adjoining our acreage. But A, hubby and I are hermits and don't care if people do or don't like us, and B, this husband and wife team are already becoming sour to us due to lack of response. Where does our money go? There was even a recreational easement on our deed, and the HOA didn't know where it was. We paid out of our own pockets to have our surveyor find and mark the easement. It is overgrown with mature trees and overgrowth and not accessible at all. Update. It looks like there's also a rider at the end of the LIBOR that describes the parcels and requires a majority vote to change any restrictions. It looks like it's completely legal. You've helped me tremendously. But now, I'm even more confused about where the money goes. I guess it doesn't matter since I'm legally bound and $50 a year is nothing really. Thank you so much for all your help. Even though the HOA is clearly not following Michigan HOA law as far as meetings and budgets, it's not worth the $50 a year to fight and to get everyone ticked when it's all legit on some level anyways. I wish that you could take down this HOA, OP, because it might not even be real in the first place. What would you do if you were OP? Uncle lives near an HOA, posted by Blood Bunny 656 with a bonus story. So my uncle bought a piece of land and built his house on it. Several years later, several houses were made around him and an HOA was formed. He never joined it because he hated the idea of HOAs. The whole problem started when my uncle saw several kids playing in his backyard. Now, my uncle has 7 dogs. 2 are bloodhounds, 1 was a pit bull, and the rest were mutts. So he was worried that the kids might get bitten by a dog. So he built a fence around the border of his land, and it took him 3 days to finish. However, the day after he finished, he gets a fine from the HOA for building the fence without the permission of the HOA. He ignores it since he is not part of the HOA and the fence is on his land and was not breaking rules. A week later, someone from the HOA comes to talk to him about the fence, and he says he is not paying the fine because he's not part of the HOA. And then he explains why he built the fence. The HOA apparently thought he had 1 dog and not 7. My uncle says goodbye, thinking that they had come to an agreement that the fence was fine, but my uncle would paint it, which he'd already planned to do, he had just not gotten around to it. The next day, however, he gets several fines, one of which was for his dogs and another was for the fence that he again ignored. Several days later, he buys 2 white paint cans and starts to paint the fence. However, while he is doing it, several people that lived there walked by. Some said hi, others just glared at him as they walked on by. He paid them no mind, and after a while, several people from the HOA came by to complain about the color he chose. He didn't understand what was wrong. After all, it was white, so he asked what was wrong with it, and they said they didn't approve him building the fence, yet alone painting it, and they proceeded to say that he has to tear down the whole fence by the end of the week and then request for permission to build the fence again. He refuses and says again that he was not part of the HOA. This turns into an argument where his dogs are brought up, and by the end of it, they were threatening his dogs. By this point, there was a small crowd gathering and watching, so my uncle calms himself down, picks up his paint, and goes back home. 3 days later, while he was still walking around the inside of his fence, he finds several pieces of bacon covered in a white powder. When he picked them up, he realized they smelled like a chemical, and he realized that someone was trying to poison his dogs. Getting super ticked, he installs several cameras around the fence to find out who it was, and he actually gets them on camera one night. So he goes to the HOA meeting that was happening next month, but when he gets there, it turned out that the person trying to poison his dogs was the HOA president, who I will call Karen. He hadn't even met her until then. He still showed the video and even brought some of the bacon as proof and said that if it continued, he would contact the police. After that, the bacon stopped being thrown into his yard and she was voted out and later moved somewhere else. It wasn't until a month after the Karen moved that he was told the kids he saw playing in his yard were the Karen's kids, and that since he built the fence, they had been complaining non-stop for months that they could no longer play there. And my uncle only didn't call the cops immediately because he had some bad run-ins with them when he was younger and didn't trust them to not screw him over. Holy cow, it's one thing to lie, HOA, but to poison the dogs as a president? Insane. There's a story in this comment and it's crazy. Lucky the Lurker says, if he doesn't want to call the cops, call a lawyer. Have the lawyer talk to the cops. Get an attorney and a no contact order. In most places, the offenders, the HOA, must reimburse legal fees. I had a similar issue with the HOA that formed next to my property. Here are some of the issues I had over the last 20 plus years with the HOA. They tried to force my membership. They tried to fine me for violations despite not being a member. They harassed my daughter on our property and once stopped her while driving through the HOA. Those involved got jail and a fine. They tried to block my access to my property by saying that the public road that goes through the HOA was private and said that I needed to join the HOA if I want to use the street. They towed vehicles legally parked on my property. They illegally used my property as a parking lot and community fair, causing damage to my field, including contaminated soil. The equipment leaked oil and the chemicals onto a field that I used to grow hay and graze my horses. They removed a portion of my fence to gain illegal access to the property and cut down several trees on my property without my permission. And then they would trespass multiple times. They'd violate a no-contact order multiple times. They started with the demand to join, and I replied with a letter stating, I don't, and citing the law. They followed up with fines and demand letters, and I replied once via certified mail, restating that I'm not in the HOA and not legally required to join. Next notice I got from them, I called an attorney and let them handle it. They knocked on my door and harassed my daughter in our yard when I told them that I wasn't speaking to them to call my lawyer. After that, I have kept a no-contact order in place for 20 plus years. We have gone this route every 5 to 7 years. New people join the board and forget that there's a no-contact order, and every time they send me something, it just goes to my attorney and they get a letter, a copy of the no-contact order, and a bill for his time. Sometimes they try to press issues with the lawyer, and they always lose and have to pay the fees. For this reason, I hired the most expensive law firm I could find. Anytime they legitimately need to talk to me, paying the legal fees is worth it to not have to talk to the HOA. I haven't heard from the HOA for a few years, but I don't doubt I will again, so the no-contact order stays in place. I do get along with people in that neighborhood, despite several expensive assessments they've had to pay to cover the HOA's screw-ups. I'm even friends with someone who's a board member at large, holds no office, just votes on new things. They remind new board members that they need to contact my lawyer. I am so sorry you got screwed like that, but I'm glad you got it in place to get them back when they try to get a hold of you against the rules. How to Kill an HOA, posted by FredKing1313. Okay, so here's what's up. Me and my wife have been getting harassed by a new HOA to join, as my house is the lone holdout on a beachfront strip. Short and sweet. I write this today because my friends and I have discovered the two-step process to kill an annoying HOA. With my highly evolved ape brain, I have spent the weekend scouring the laws and the legal loopholes and have found, through a series of quantum calculations that will only make sense to me, I have found the means to kill the HOA anywhere. Step 1. Organize your community and friends at the next meeting. Have someone or yourself call for no confidence and vote to remove all HOA board members. Vote in new members. Step 2. Have a new president. Vote to overturn all standing fines, and then end meeting with a vote to dissolve the HOA entirely. Any properties owned by the HOA are to be sold to pay off any debts owed by the HOA. Record everything, and then turn a copy of the video into the governing body where you live as proof. 2 steps to much success and a happier life. Nice work, OP. Solar panels don't match the aesthetic of the neighborhood, posted by MomCat859. Admittedly, our HOA is pretty good. The fees aren't that high for houses, less than $30 per month, and a little higher for the condos. The pool is pretty decent and not that far away. We decided to put solar panels on our house. The HOA told me that we were not allowed to do that, and we asked why. They said it would ruin the aesthetic of the neighborhood. The solar panel company told us that that was illegal. They have a legal department that has to argue with HOAs all the time. It took 2 months before we finally got the okay to put the solar panels in. I just wonder, is it just a power trip for the HOAs that they have to make you jump through hoops to go a little greener? Shaking my head. That's what HOAs do. They try to prey on people who don't know the rules, but when you do, you take them down. Click my next crazy HOA Karen compilation on your screen to continue your listening session. Thanks for checking this one out, and see you in the next one.